Welcome to our very first video. My co-host today is Josh. Josh, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi everyone, I'm Josh C. Located in the Boston area. I've been a housing organizer for a couple of years, primarily organizing tenants into tenant unions to fight back against their landlords with Boston DSA Housing and the newly formed Greater Boston Tenant Union.
Great, well thank you so much for joining me. Today's video is about why the free market does not build affordable housing. Now, it seems like there ought to be a way to build some small, no-frills, really modest apartments and rent them at affordable prices. But you really just can't do this. It's just not possible. And this really matters because we are in the midst of an affordable housing crisis, even before the pandemic arrived. Half of all renters spend more than 30% of their income on housing costs. 18 million American households spend more than half of their income on housing costs. And in the past 2 decades, average move-in rents have more than doubled. I mean, we could just go on.
Yeah, exactly. So if the rents that are being charged can't pay back the loan, they just won't build the housing.
Exactly. And our current housing policy assumes that the free market really can solve this problem. But if it turns out that there's no way for the free market to build affordable housing, then we're going to have to fundamentally change how we approach this problem. Now, what makes this a great tool is that it uses real-world data. Denver has a public program that finances the construction of rental housing. But in order to participate, your full application is available to public inspection. So Urban and NHC were able to look over these applications to build this tool. So that means that the data are not estimates. This is what housing developers actually paid to build affordable housing. Okay, so here's the tool. And basically, we're imagining that we're 2 investors who have a few $1,000,000 to use as a down payment for a housing project. And we're doing some calculations to see if it's feasible to build some modest apartments and then charge affordable rents. And so what we're doing is really similar to buying a house. A minority of the building is paid for with a cash down payment, and a majority is paid for using a mortgage. So does that all make sense?
Yeah, exactly. That makes perfect sense for like a construction loan. This is what on the developer side what they would see.
So the first section is NOI, that's net operating income. And this is simply what income does our housing project have coming in? And the first item is average monthly rent. And this is comprised of 2 items. First, what is the income of the people who are living there? And AMI stands for Area Median Income for the Denver area. And that includes the suburbs. So there's a lot of really well-off people in this calculation. But if you're at 100%, that means that you're exactly in the middle. So half of everyone is richer than you, half of everyone is poorer than you. This next one, share spent on rent. So that's just saying how much rent should we charge them? 30% is the government's definition of affordable. Now the next 5 items are just some things that you have to think about as a landlord. So things like hiring a building manager to collect the rent checks and to answer the phones. We're going to have to set aside money for some day-to-day things, like if there's a leaky faucet in somebody's apartment that needs to be repaired. We're also going to have to save for some big things, like eventually our furnace or the building's water heater is going to need to be replaced. And so we're going to have to save up for all of these things in order to run our apartment. So really get in that mindset, right? We're a couple of investors. We're looking for a profit. So we're just trying to make sure that these numbers add up. And so we're trying to think of everything that we'll need to do. Okay, so that's everything. So let's see what happens when we plug in data from the real world to see how much this actually costs. So I'm going to click reset to defaults because the defaults are what they found the numbers in the real world to actually be. And these are the numbers we'd have to deal with if we were actually going to undertake this project. So reset the defaults, and then I'm going to turn off this tax credits one because we're not using that, as we already talked about. So now if if these buildings fill up with blue, that means that our project is going to break even and that we can proceed. And as you can see, it's nowhere near, right? We have a massive, massive deficit. So if we go back up here, let's say, what if we jacked up the rent to just to see what would happen? What if we jacked up the rent to 75%? We made people pay 3/4 of their income on rent. And of course, this guy's going to yell at us because who can afford that? But as you can see, even if we charge 3/4, 3/4 of people's income on rent, they still can't. Our projects still aren't going to break even. And then, okay, so, and we started talking a little bit about this. What if we stick with that 30% level, but we start renting to moderate incomes? So maybe we can't build affordable housing for really low income folks, but maybe we can pull it off for moderate incomes. So let's change the renter's income to 90% AMI. And so now he's yelling at us for raising the income of people we're going to be renting to. And so even if we're renting to right now we're not really making necessarily affordable housing, right? We're making housing that's affordable to the middle class, right? 90%, and we're well into the middle class. And we're still nowhere near breaking even. And we can do some funny stuff. Like let's say that we don't save any money for maintenance. Let's say we don't save any money for maintenance, and we still aren't breaking even. Let's say we kidnap the architect and the engineer's family, and we force them to work for free. That'd be here. And even if the architect and engineers and they all work for free, it still doesn't break even. What if, so the interim costs, what if somehow we blackmail someone at the bank and they don't charge us any money until people move in and they start paying rents? And then this actually also is our insurance, so we don't have any insurance during construction. And if we take
Sounds
away,
dangerous.
Right? So even if we take that away, we still can't break even. If you turn construction costs down to zero, the buildings just collapse. So you may see a pattern here. We don't have any control over any of this. So, we have to pay the engineer. We have to make our mortgage payments. We have to save for the building's maintenance. We can't just put in 60-hour work weeks and go back to school for a master's degree. And then the bank says, oh, you have a master's degree. Well, we'll knock 0.5 percentage point off your interest rate. In this simulation, we can adjust these numbers, but in the real world, we don't actually have any control over any of these numbers. There's no amount of planning that can make our affordable housing project break even. You want to give it a try?
Yeah, sure. I'll
Okay.
give this a try.
Okay, so you're convinced.
Yeah, I mean, you're preaching to the choir here.
Of course.
I do a lot of housing work, so I was already skeptical of the free market to come in.
Yeah. No, I found this tool to be really eye-opening, even though I kind of knew the fundamentals. It was pretty eye-opening to actually see the numbers. The last problem is that we have a lot of experience of forcing for-profit developers to charge affordable rents in exchange for public subsidy. And all of it eventually becomes unrestricted, unaffordable housing. So if we want a solution that lasts, this isn't it. We've tried it and it doesn't work. So if we're not going to keep subsidizing our current system, the only other option is some kind of public housing. And the best public housing systems in the world are in Austria, Hong Kong, Singapore, and the Netherlands. And this is great housing, high quality. Everyone wants to live there. It's available to everyone, but preference is given to those with the greatest need. It's forever affordable. And that's really what we're trying to accomplish with the Housing for All podcast. Let's learn from these systems and use some of the ideas that work in the real world and see if we can't learn from that and solve our own housing problems. So any thoughts
Yeah.
before we conclude?
No, that makes perfect sense. I mean, the way we've examined the system, shown that it doesn't work, and if we're already spending this much money on the system, wouldn't it be prudent of us to look at other countries in the world, see how they run their systems, and put the same, resources towards building something similar? There's no reason to keep throwing money at something that clearly isn't meeting the needs of the people.
Hey, that's what our organization is trying to accomplish, to teach people about how these other systems work and to see what we can learn. So I couldn't agree with you more. Couldn't have said it better myself. So thanks again for joining. The way I would wrap all this up is to say the free market will never build affordable housing because an apartment that charges affordable rents will never generate enough revenue to pay back the loans needed to build it. Either we devote even more public subsidy for private housing, or we create more public housing.
Yeah, exactly.